over the years that we had an opportunity to walk with couples through difficult times in their marriage, it seems like there is definitely a draw towards taking some time apart, even as a married couple, to sort of get your head right, and consider how things move forward in your marriage. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it can lead to disaster.
It can. So let's talk about that. Separation in marriage. Right now. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Nathan Warnock.
I'm Andrea Warnock.
And this is Marriage Monday. This is a show that we do every Monday here on the Marriage by Design podcast, where we talk about God's design for marriage as revealed in His Word, as well as some practical conversation about how we can best live that out.
Right. So today we're talking about separation and how that oftentimes leads to divorce. And is separation a biblical thing? Right. Is separation something that we should be seeking to do? All that sort of, the hang-ups with it, all that sort of thing. Right.
That's right. So kind of the way that we're going to step through this is talking a little bit about statistics on separation, to just, I always like, when I can, to add some statistical analysis of these topics that we talk about. Yep. Because, as you know, if you've watched our channel for very long, we always, more than anything else, we want to follow things on a biblical model. So we want to know, what does the Bible say about this, and bring that to your attention. But where we can, I always like to look statistically. Do statistics support what the Bible says here? Do they not? So I want to talk a little bit about some statistics with regards to separation. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what does the Bible say about separation based on what the Bible says about marriage, which we've talked about a ton on this channel. So we're not going to talk a ton about what does the Bible say about the meaning of marriage. I think you're going to hit on that just a little bit. But then we're going to talk about, how does separation line up or not line up with that plan for marriage. Then we're going to talk to two specific groups of people that I find struggle with this separation issue in marriage. The first is the group of people who are represented by a spouse who has caught the other spouse in a sin act, right? So most notably, you might be thinking of things like infidelity, but it could also be things like mismanagement of family resources, or perhaps even abuse issues with regards to kids, where maybe, it's like verbally abusing the kids, or emotionally abusing, the kids or the spouse, or, whatever, like yelling at them, or whatever the case may be like that. Could also be things like gambling or drinking or substance abuse issues, those types of things. So to the man or woman who has caught their spouse in one of those things and is now asking the question, either should I move out or should I kick my spouse out of the house for a time? So we're going to talk to that situation first, and then second, talk just a little bit to the couple that's just going, hey, things aren't going well right now in our marriage. We've maybe tried a few things. They don't seem to be improving. Let's just take some time. This seems to be the in vogue language. Let's take some time to focus on us individually, and then we'll come back together and work on the marriage, right. Which sounds poetic. We're going to talk about, is that living in reality or is it not? But before we do any of that, we wanted to address, any time we talk about things like separation, we always want to make sure that we first address the abuse issue.
Right. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about abuse. First of all, if you're in an abusive situation, particularly a physically abusive situation, then you definitely need to create distance. You need to separate for your physical safety or your kids' physical safety. Yep. And totally necessary. You should definitely get the authorities involved, and then get your church involved. Hopefully you're in with the church so that you can get involved in that. Not to, my hope is that the heart is not I'm going to get them involved to get you and take you down kind of thing.
Right.
But really, the heart should be, I need to get them involved for our safety, for both of our health, and for really stepping through this process and for long-term health. So,
that's right.
So if there's physical abuse, of course you should be getting out, separating physically.
Yeah.
To for your own safety. I will sort of. So then we move into the other parts of abuse, like verbal abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, all those other kinds of abuses, and that gets a little stickier because situations are different, right? All situations are different, and also people have different ideas of what abuse is or isn't, or really bad abuse and just kind of you're a dick sometimes.
Speaking of emotionally or verbal,
right?
Specifically.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. So reality is, if you are married, you are probably verbally abusing somebody or emotionally abusing somebody at some point, right?
We all lose our patience at times.
Yes.
We yell when we shouldn't.
Right. So, but people's standards are in different places. So it's a kind of a hard thing to talk about because there's so many different situations and that sort of thing. But with those sorts of things, again, the heart should be that we want to address this situation for our health and for our reconciliation, and not a get you and take you down kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Or I'm looking for a way out, and I'm going to use this as my way out. Like, oh, you abused me by calling me an idiot. I'm out.
Right. Yeah. Sin is sin, guys. And you can go to Matthew 18.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
That's where I would start. I mean, that's not exclusive to husband and wife relationships, but it's not exclusive of husband and wife relationships either. And if you have a spouse that is consistently treating you poorly, I would go to them first. If you're not having fruit doing that, then I would go through the process in Matthew 18. Get another individual you trust involved, right? Start working through that as a couple.
Yeah, so in Matthew 18, it's verses 15 through 17 that talk about that process of if somebody has sinned against you, how you process through that in order to get reconciliation, in order to really get that relationship and get that sin issue put back on track.
Right.
So yeah, strongly encourage you to deal with that, and also recognize that all situations are different. So I of course can't tell you what to do in all situations, but that don't use it as a just gotcha, I'm out kind of thing.
Right.
For those emotional and verbal sort of abuses.
Right.
But if there's also a really difficult, sorry, I keep cutting you off. It's also a really difficult thing. So I don't want you to hear me being callous against that either.
That's
because
right.
it wrecks you. And I get that. I've been there. Those abuses are so difficult, but we also are called to really, we're also called to do things the way that God has laid out for us to do them, even if we feel like...
That's right.
Even if we feel like in our flesh, I'm done with this. I don't want to give them any chances. Whatever. We need to be... What I'm saying is we need to be God-honoring.
That's right.
Even when somebody sins against us, we need to be God-honoring.
That's right. And even in the case of physical abuse, I believe that the hope would be that time of separation and getting legal authorities involved would ultimately result in that spouse that is victimizing those closest to them would result in either jail time or whatever the law allows, and hopefully that by that they recognize the sin of their ways and are able to humble themselves before their wife and their kids, and that there's able to be restoration in that marriage and in that family.
Right.
But when it comes to separation, if there's physical abuse, you got to take that super seriously and get that distance, physical separation, if for no other reason than to protect you and your kids.
Right. With a hope and praying that eventually leads to reconciliation over a time of building trust and all that sort of thing.
Right. All right. So as we move in then to the rest of our conversation on separation, I wanted to start with a little bit of statistical analysis on separation.
Yeah,
so I pulled these statistics, and some of them are 10 years, a little over 10 years old. So not necessarily the most up-to-date, but as we've talked about with statistics in the past, it doesn't do you a lot of good to study statistics that are 6 minutes old, because the course of time sort of allows us to frame these statistics and make sense of them. Mm-hmm. We talked about that when we were talking about statistics with regards to living together before you're married, which that video you can check out right here. So when we look at statistical numbers on separation, what we're talking about is the number of adults who are separated. And again, the statistic's about 10 years old, so tragically you can probably assume this number's gone up. But one thing I found fascinating is the number of women who identify themselves as separated, 2,916,327 women.
So sort of the same number of men-ish,
right? One would think. Now, men who consider themselves separated, 1,878,943.
Yeah, are they in denial?
Right, so there's like 1.1 million men who are apparently in denial about whether or not they are separated from their spouse. Fascinating to me. I also found, and I didn't write this one down because it's not really pertinent to our conversation, I just found it interesting. Women are twice as likely to separate from their husbands as men are from their wives, which is kind of an interesting thing. It'd be interesting to dig into that a little bit more. Almost half of those who separate remain separated for at least a year before they get divorced. So separation, you might think, hey, this is a short-term thing. And in fact, I can tell you, in almost every case we've been a party to helping a couple, the separation was specifically set up as, hey, this is just a short-term thing. It's going to be 2 or 3 months. And very rarely, if ever, in our experience, has that timetable actually been held to.
Right.
80% of those who go through a marital separation ultimately divorce. Most of those divorce within 3 years. So 4 out of every 5 couples that separates gets a divorce. Remember that statistic because we're going to come back to that towards the end of the episode. 2/3, this is fascinating, 2/3 of unhappily married spouses who stay married report that their marriages were happy 5 years later. The most unhappy marriages reported the most dramatic turnarounds. Among those who rated their marriage as very unhappy, 8 out of 10 who avoided divorce reported being very happily married 5 years later.
Wow.
So think of that. 2/3, you have a 67% chance, if you stay committed to your spouse, that 5 years later you will be happily married. Now, you might be going, 5 years? That might as well be 50 years with the state of my marriage right now. Hold that thought, because I want to share another statistic with you right now. And then let's talk about these statistics together. So you might be saying 5 years to go from being unhappy to very happy when I can just bail out on this marriage and find somebody who I want to be happy with. Well, I have a statistic for you. On average, unhappily married adults who divorced, whether staying single or remarrying. So it doesn't matter if you're saying, hey, I'm going to get divorced and stay single, or I'm going to get divorced and marry this person that will make me happier. Unhappily married adults who divorced, whether staying single or remarrying, reported being no happier than they were when they were unhappily married. and for those adults that were unhappily married and stayed married. So in other words, it didn't matter to them. So you've got unhappily married adults who stayed married reported being happy 5 years later. Unhappily married adults who divorced reported still being unhappy, whether they stayed single or got remarried.
Interesting.
5 years later.
That's really interesting.
So your options, according to this, on average, and again, this is statistical, right? So maybe you will be the exception. That's what we always tell ourselves. So if you can stay married and unhappy, work at it, commit to your spouse, and 5 years from now, you have an 8 in 10 chance of being happily married. 80% chance. Or you can bail on the marriage, right? Go down the separation and ultimately divorce route. And 5 years from now, on average, you will be likely as unhappy as you are right now. Those are sort of the options that the statistics give there.
That 2/3 statistics that you gave about 2/3 of couples that say that they're unhappy will report being happy. I'm going to say that preaches, but in a completely different way, that can we please have an understanding that marriage has ebbs and flows?
That's exactly right.
We should be expecting that as we get into marriage. It is not always going to be great, and we are going to have valleys in our marriage, and we need to walk through the valleys.
Yeah.
We need to be willing to walk through those and say, I don't like you right now, and I don't want to be married to you right now, but we're going to walk through this together. And we're gonna start hiking up a mountain then, and we'll get to a mountaintop. Maybe that takes us 5 years.
Right.
But my expectation of marriage is it sucks sometimes.
Right.
And that's okay. We're still here and we're still in it.
Right. Yeah, I didn't put this statistic down because of what you just said. It's like a duh thing for me. But one of the statistics that they actually pulled was like 92% of couples say that they had seasons of marriage that they considered very unhappy. And I thought, the other 7 point whatever percent, I'm not sure what they're doing. Because I think there's 100% of couples, as far as I can tell, that go through periods of being very unhappy. Maybe those were newlyweds or something.
Well, maybe. But I think we need to be having real conversation with nearlyweds, newlyweds, or whatever, that your marriage is going to suck. And
sometimes.
More than once, probably. Over the course of your lifetime together, you are probably going to have a sucky marriage sometimes. And you've just got to accept that and be willing to walk through it together.
Right. And that's okay. It doesn't say anything about your spouse.
It doesn't mean you need to get divorced.
That's right. That's exactly right. Could be circumstantial. Could be things you need to work on within yourself. I mean, any number. That's why a marriage is a covenant, not a contract.
Right.
As we'll talk about here in a minute. Okay, couple final statistics. 16.2% of those separated or divorced one time will be alcoholics. I found this just fascinating as I was reading through this. That's an incredible statistic when you think about it.
Statistics is for just any general person being an alcoholic.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what. I mean, it's got to be super low, right? I mean, it's probably, I don't know if it'd even be maybe a couple percent of just the general population. That would be a fascinating thing to look up. Here's the real reason why I put this on here. Do you know what your percent chance of contracting COVID-19 is?
0.1%?
No, it's like 7%. 1 in 12. Right? You have a 1 in 12% chance, or 1 in 12% chance of contracting COVID-19, and we've completely turned the country upside down to make sure that nobody catches it. This is a almost 2 in 10% chance of becoming an alcoholic, and yet you will not find anyone. In fact, in most cases, you will find people that are all aboard with, hey, that person doesn't make you happy, bail on that relationship. Get divorced, get separated, no big deal. You'll find someone out there who's happy. 16.2% of those people that we're emboldening to make that decision will become an alcoholic statistically. Wow. Okay, and then the last thing is, again, that I just found fascinating. Those who are separated or divorced have a 44% chance of suffering from a psychiatric disorder, which you can understand. Divorce and separation both are super messy. Even if you're going to disagree with us ultimately on whether you should or shouldn't be getting separated, I'm sure you would agree that neither of those things are preferable things.
That's a high statistic. Psychiatric disorder, like, does depression get included in that?
Yep.
That's a really high. That's 44%. That's a high statistic.
Yeah, it is. So, my point with both of those are, things that we have a way lower percentage chance of affecting our lives, we're making to be like the biggest thing ever. Mm-hmm. But these things that actually have a proven over decades high percent chance of introducing something bad into your life, we do everything we possibly can to embolden people to jump from spouse to spouse and separate and, be married, don't be married, whatever the case may be. It's ridiculous. It is a fundamental hypocrisy of particularly American culture. And when I see it, I'm going to call it out.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like to put those statistics in there. Okay, so statistics aside, let's talk a little bit about what the Bible says about marriage and separation.
Right. So let's talk first about what's the purpose of marriage. We've dug into this deep.
Yes, we have.
On our channel before. So this is going to be a really quick overview of what's the purpose of marriage. Well, we see in the Bible, we can look in Ephesians 5, go to verse 22 to 24, and we see that God has created marriage to be a representation of his relationship with us as believers, the church. So marriage is a reflection of his relationship with us and his marriage to the church. So that's the purpose of marriage. We're reflections of him. We are reflections of that marriage that he has with us, that relationship that he has with us, and we're a living testimony of that.
Yep.
So again, we've gone into deep levels of that here on the channel, so I'm not going to go into that a ton. But our marriage is not just for, it's for the two of us and raising kids and being fruitful and multiplying, and then it's done when we're done.
Right.
It's a living testimony of the Lord, and other people get to experience the Lord through our marriage.
Yep.
And through just us living our lives, living our marriage out. So it's not for us, although it can be for our benefit. It's really a covenant to the Lord, which a covenant, and you might be talking about this a little bit more. A contract and a covenant. A contract is you mutually can get out of it, right? A covenant is, regardless of circumstances, that commitment doesn't change.
That's right.
So our covenant, our marriage covenant with the Lord is saying, regardless of circumstances, this relationship, this union does not change. So, and that's like God's covenant with us. As we come to him as believers, that never changes. That never shakes. We're never not his children anymore. Uh-huh. Once we become children of the Lord, we're always his bride, just as in marriage, that union should never be broken. Right.
And that's really the problem with separation from a biblical standpoint, is when we look at our marriage as that picture Andrea described of our relationship with the Lord, we are a walking testimony of that relationship to those around us.
Right.
So how I treat my wife and how she treats me as her husband is a mission, a ministry, a testimony, a witness of what that relationship is designed to be. And so when we separate as a Christian couple, what we're doing is we're misrepresenting that relationship that God desires to have with us. Because what are we saying? We're saying this marriage relationship that's meant to be a picture of God's desired relationship with us, if God gets sort of tired of the way things are, he's just going to bail. Mm-hmm. And he needs to take some time to focus on him. Right? That's what we do, if we're being honest, if we look at this as a testimony. Now, you might be going, well, nobody actually looks at marriage as a testimony of God's relationship with us as his people. And you might be right, but we need to recognize that's a reflection of society around us, not a reflection of God's desire. Right? This is marriage by design according to God's word. So the fact that you might go, oh, well, nobody thinks of that anyway, doesn't mean God doesn't look at it that way. And so when we start misrepresenting God to those around us, that's not something biblically that God puts up with. Mm-hmm. And we just did an episode talking about this where we talked about living together, and we made this a very similar argument to this based on Moses in Exodus and Numbers. And you can watch that video by clicking here. But in that video, we make this exact same argument that when we misrepresent the gospel message, that's serious business. And when we separate in our marriage, what we're doing is we're taking that picture that God has desired for marriage to be, and we're misrepresenting it to those around us. Mm-hmm. Right? We're saying that, hey, for this covenant thing, that's true. There is a covenant. God has a covenant with us as his people. But it's a covenant with exceptions. Mm. And that's not an honest representation of marriage in the Bible or God's relationship as we see it in the Bible. So that's the problem with separation from a doctrinal, theological standpoint. So having thought about that a little bit, babe, let's address those two kind of groups of people that you and I talked about wanting to address. So the first one is to the spouse that has caught their husband or wife in infidelity or in some other sinful behavior and is asking the question, they're righteously angry, right? They've been victimized by a spouse who has gone outside the bounds of the marriage or in one way or another broken trust within the marriage. And they're honestly asking the question, either should I leave or should I kick my spouse out of the house and make them go find somewhere else? How do you help that person think through their responsibilities as a Christian?
Very slowly. So I was in that circumstance when in 2012 I discovered Nathan was having a sexual affair with somebody. This was the fourth time that he had chosen to go outside of our marriage and have an inappropriate relationship with somebody. And by that point, I was really fed up with that, of course. And that's saying it very lightly. But I found out what was going on and really knew that I needed to step very slowly and very deliberately. And I'm telling you, I really have a hard time even telling this story, partially because it's very emotional because I remember what all that felt like, but also too because I made a lot of decisions in that time that were not by my own, that were totally just God leading me. Mm. And yeah, the credit goes to him because that's not who I am in and of myself, So I have a hard time saying it because it was amazing to look back on and see the way that the Lord led me, and I just never want to think like I'm sweet because I'm not. Mm. And it was crazy the things that God stepped me through. So yeah. So I just want to preface this with that. I'm not saying I'm cool because I'm not. So I knew that God was saying, you need to step very deliberately and very slowly. Don't be in a hurry. And a lot of times when those big sin issues are unearthed and we realize those things for whatever reason, I can tell you the reason, it's Satan. We have this hurry up mentality. I need to hurry up and make a decision. I need to hurry up and leave him. I need to hurry up and get my money separated from his. I need to whatever it is, And that is totally not of the Lord. So I knew I needed to be very slow and very deliberate and seek counsel, wise, godly counsel. So, the first thing I would say is move slowly. There's probably nothing that needs to be done in an instant, And a lot of times when we're reacting on emotion, those decisions that we're making are really poor decisions. Yeah. So I didn't want to make decisions based on emotion. Yeah. I am also somebody who who is very motivated by consequences. And so I took a lot of time to really think about the consequences of decisions that I would make. So did I want to leave Nathan? Heck yes. I wanted to either leave him. Well, really, I just wanted to kick him out. We had a house. I was like, I shouldn't be leaving this house. He should be leaving this house. I definitely wanted to kick him out. I wanted nothing to do with him. But God gave me this desire for my marriage. And I spent a lot of time with the Lord in that time, because I was so brokenhearted and so beat down and really at the bottom of the bottom of everything, and knew that there were so many days that I actually felt like my next breath could only be from the Lord, because I couldn't exist. I was so brokenhearted. And then I needed the Lord's strength to even take my next breath and be able to spend time with our son and just taking care of him and being a good mom to him, even though I was in the depths of despair. So I took a lot of time to seek the Lord and very motivated by consequences. And when I thought of, like, I want to kick Nathan out, or I want to leave, or whatever, God was telling me, yeah, but you'll have no influence if you leave. You'll have no, because Nathan wasn't leaving. I don't know why, but he wasn't leaving. He was still in the house. And I knew that if I left, I would have no influence over him, and he would be free to do just whatever he wanted to do. So I chose to stay, and it was a really hard place to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we both knew he was having an affair, but we were still living in the house together, and it was very verbally abusive, very emotionally abusive situation. But I knew that the Lord could carry me through, and I trusted him, and he gave me hope, really, because other people had hope. It was because other people in my life that I had sought for godly counsel weren't telling me to divorce him, so that
right.
I knew then there must be hope. God must be bigger than this. And I didn't want to make a decision that would alter the rest of my life that was wrong. So I chose to stay in the house. I chose to not separate. I chose to just continue to seek the Lord. And then I started to ask, okay, Lord, what do you want to do in me through this? Because I can't make Nathan do anything. I can't change him, so change me. And what do I need to learn through this? How can I be a better wife to him, because we are still living in the same house? How can I be a better mom? All that sort of thing. And so I started to really look to the Lord to just work on me and trust it. And then the last part that I would say too is I really doubted if God was big enough to bring Nathan back. I mean, I can't even, you guys see him the way he is now. I can't even describe to you how vastly different he was back then.
Right.
You wouldn't even recognize or know him. So I couldn't imagine the person that he was ever being anything different. But I also knew that he was calling me to stay in my marriage. And I really wrestled with, can I trust the Lord with my heart? Can I trust him to stay in the home? Can I trust him to stay in this marriage and to continue moving forward and just be? Can I trust him with all of that, knowing that he's called me to stay, knowing that divorce is not anything that he ever desires for any of his children, and believing that he can do a miracle, even if that takes the rest of my life. And it took a process, but I had come to a point that I said, if this takes the rest of my life, I'll stay here and do it. Because I will believe until my dying breath that God can do something about this. And so I chose to trust the Lord with my heart. I couldn't trust Nathan with my heart, but I could trust God. And so for those reasons, I chose not to separate from him. And I chose to stay. And God did crazy things in that time.
Yeah, it's thanks for sharing that, babe. I know that's hard. One thing you said that I want to underscore because I think it's really important is when you said that the problem with separation, as the Lord laid it on your heart, and as I know you were counseled by other women, is that when you leave the situation, your influence leaves as well. And we see, this is a biblical thing. We see this in 1 Corinthians 7, we see that, and we see it in 1 Peter 3. A number of times where the apostles or Paul talk about marriage, they make that point too. Right. That if you're married, and they're talking about to an unbeliever, if you're married to an unbeliever, and they're willing to live with you, live with them. Because through your influence, you might win them to the gospel. And certainly was the case in our marriage at the time, because I was acting, like an idiot. And you, through the power of the Lord, were really changing in noticeable ways in your study of the Bible and your reliance on Him and your demeanor. And that really did impact me during that time when we were living together, but things were up in the air.
Right.
So yeah, man, I really appreciate that. I wanted to underscore that. So tell, we had that statistic earlier about going from unhappy to happily married. In our situation, how long would you say that took?
Well,
please don't say it still hasn't happened.
No, that's not true. So 2012 is when that was taking place. And I would say by the next year, I can remember where we were at the next year. When you cut it off, it was in May of 2012. And I know by May of 2013, I would say we were on the road to happily. And definitely by January or February of 2014, we were happily married.
Yeah, so a year and a half. Year and a half for us. So just to give, if you guys are listening, an idea, there is hope. And for us, praise the Lord, it took less than the full 5 years.
Right. Well, that's just what they interviewed people as. Yeah. There's also this realization I came to during that time that was like, this is not eternity for me.
Right.
This life is a living sacrifice to the Lord, and if I sacrifice my life here on earth to do what He's asked me to do, which may be the hardest thing I will ever have to do, I'm willing to do it because I get to spend eternity with the Lord. And while that doesn't affect my salvation, the choice to stay with you or not, I know that my life is spent as a sacrifice to the Lord. And if this is what He's called me to do, then I'm happy to do it. And then who knows how that'll affect the kingdom? Who knows how that'll affect eternity and other people? I don't know.
Sure.
And so I was willing to say, yeah, I can live a sucky life here and I can get my head around that if this is what my life is going to be, because it's not going to be like this forever. Right.
So let's transition for a minute to the couple that's considering just taking some time to focus on me. Right. So this isn't a couple where something tragic maybe has just happened that is bringing this into question. It's a couple where maybe things have been on the crazy cycle for a while, and now both parties are just sort of fed up with it, or maybe one party more than the other, and the other's sort of coming on board just to hopefully ease things over. But what we hear from a lot of people is, we need to just take some time off to focus on me, and then we'll come back together. And I wanted to just point out a couple of problems with that. First of all, statistically, we already shared the statistic. 80% of couples that separate get divorced. So we need to at least be honest that, and I would be willing to bet a huge percentage of those 80% were decided on the divorce before they separated.
Probably.
And this is sort of like easing into it.
Right.
Or a trial run. It's an opportunity for both of the two couples to sort of lock down a job and some income and these types of things, a housing situation before we get divorced. It's tragic. So, first of all, I want to just point out that marriage by definition, biblical definition, is not about you.
Right.
So when we say we're going to take some time off to focus on me, you're immediately outside of the bounds of a godly marriage.
Right.
Because godly marriage isn't about you. It's about your covenant to the Lord for the benefit of that other person. And so, for us, any of us who enter into marriage, we need to recognize that when we enter into marriage, if that's part of God's calling on our life, what we're actually doing is telling the Lord, we're going to be taking some time to sacrifice me. And that amount of time is the rest of your life.
Right.
That's what marriage is.
You're no longer focusing on you. You're focusing on your spouse.
That's right. Practically, also, separation practices bad habits, prepares you mentally for divorce and financially for divorce, and even if you are genuinely wanting to focus on getting your marriage put back together, it undermines that. And I want to step through those three things real quick, and then we're going to get off the horn. But first of all, separating practices bad marriage habits. Right? We've talked about this in the past. Human beings are habit creatures. Right now, you might have some bad habits in play even within your marriage, but separation isn't going to fix those bad habits. Right? There isn't anything that you can do an easier job of separated in preparation for coming back together for marriage. Right? You might be able to say, well, I can be more focused on our kids. Well, your marriage isn't about your kids. Your kids are something the Lord has given you within your marriage, right? So taking time away to focus on your children means you're putting your children above your spouse, which is wrong. So we just need to be clear about that. Focusing on your job. Well, what you're doing then is saying, I need to get away from this thing the Lord's called me to in marriage so that I can prioritize my job. That's wrong. The priority is 1, God, 2, your spouse, 3, your children, 4, the other sideshow stuff, my job, my hobbies, my whatever else. And so just being honest with ourselves that separation begins us in the practice of prioritizing things above our marriage. That's by definition what a separation is. We need some time apart so that I don't have you as a distraction or this relationship as a distraction from the things that I need to accomplish. That's a problem with separation. It practices bad habits. And of course, there are other marriage habits, of course, that are not being practiced, right? Like physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, intentional dating, intentional pouring into the relationship. Those things are not happening as consistently when you're separated as they are when you're together in marriage.
Yep.
Okay, so you're practicing bad habits. Second, you're preparing yourself mentally and emotionally and financially for divorce. Right? We see this a ton. A couple where they separate, and maybe at first they even genuinely wanted to look at getting their marriage back together. And then what happens? As they're separated, they start to convince themselves, I'd be all right on my own. If we get divorced, it'll be okay because I found this job that I didn't even know was out there that I really want to do, or I found this other church across town that I really like better than the church we were going to. I found this cute house that was for sale and I bought that. It's just a great house or this great apartment complex, and you begin preparing your mind emotionally for I'll be okay if this marriage doesn't work out. You've now created for yourself a plan B where the Lord designed there to be no plan B.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, so first of all, you are practicing bad marriage habits. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Second, you're preparing yourself really for divorce. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about is even if you genuinely say, you know what, we need to separate for a time as kind of a big reset, and then we're going to come back together and see if we can make it work. Here's the problem. Inevitably, you will come together 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is down the road, and you're going to realize something that's going to be really disturbing to you. Your marriage is in the exact same spot that it was when you separated. See, the lie about separation is that we're going to separate, we're going to advance as a husband, advance as a wife, and then we're going to come back together and it's going to have solved the problems. But in reality, what separation does is it pushes pause on the problems. Mm-hmm. Now, you might come back together and there's a little bit of the distance makes the heart grow stronger, phase, yeah. Right? Where you come back together and you're like, this is amazing. Like, you were gone, I was gone, we're back together, and it's great. But that's not real, and it's not going to last because you haven't actually worked through the problems that were plaguing your marriage. And so, sooner or later, probably sooner, those issues that you dealt with are going to come back up. And then not only will you have not put together the skills to solve those issues as a couple, but you've now created an undermining in your relationship where you're going to go, oh man, I gave up all this time because I thought I was going to fix this, and we have the same exact issues. And then the temptation is going to be to go,
well, it's unfixable.
Well, I worked on this when I was apart. What'd that guy do? Mm-hmm. Right? Or, look, this is what's the legal term? This is irreconcilable. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yes,
I mean, there's just no fix for this. Well, the reality of the matter is you didn't do the hard work. I mean, like you said, difficult seasons are going to come, and it takes hard work to work through those things.
Yep, it does.
So whether you're in a position where you're considering, hey, do I need to kick this guy out or leave myself? Or whether you're in a position where you go, well, maybe separation for a season's the best alternative. We want to just encourage you that it's not. The best alternative for a difficult marriage is to commit before God to each other. It doesn't matter how difficult it gets. We're committed to working through this as a couple. First and foremost for the glory of God, but also because we want to be one of those statistics that can report being happily married in 5 years from now. And that's only going to happen from submitting your lives individually to the Lord and committing to working together as a couple in your marriage. Yep. Guys, I hope you found this video encouraging. There may be things you disagreed with. Love to have you share those with us in the comments below. You can send us an email at marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com or join us next Sunday at 8:30. We do a live event where we talk about the videos that came out this week. So today, had our video on separation. Love to have you come back and talk with us about that next Sunday. Don't miss Friday's episode as well on Family Friday, where we're going to talk about the decision to become a stay-at-home mom and what that looked like in our marriage.
Right.
Guys, thanks so much for joining us. And remember, God is for your marriage. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.